Welcome to Eureka Math. I'm Mr. Shankel. I'm going to be helping you today with Module 4, Lesson 15. Let's get started. Okay, so today we're talking about the slope of a line. The slope of a line. And that might be a new term. The slope of a line, generally speaking, is talking about the steepness of the line. How straight up and down is it, right? So if you look at graph A, we can see that it has an angle, right? This line has an angle, and when we compare it to graph B, it looks like graph B is a little more steep. So the slope would be a little greater in graph B. So slope is the steepness of a line. If I had another line, and maybe it would look like this, a horizontal line that has a slope as well. And in fact, it has no slope, so it's not steep at all. It's just a flat line. So the steepness of the line is really important in being able to define diagonal lines. And we're going to work on finding the slope today, which will lead us into writing equations of lines using the slope and something called the y-intercept. We'll get to that as we go, but what we're looking for is the slope. Now, sometimes we call the slope the variable m. And we've chosen that just as a standard. It could have been any letter, but m is slope. And the way that we find m is we find out how our y values change. So this triangle means the change in y over the change in x. So we're looking for how does the points change in the y value compared to the x value. And so we're just going to use this ratio of how the y values change over how the x values change to come up with a number for slope. So if I go back here and I get rid of some of my scribbling up here, we can do that. So let's look at the first point is here. That's the point -2, -1. And how does that point change when we go to the next point, which is 1, 1? Well, I would have to go from this point, I would have to go up. That's my change in y. So that's the change in y. The change in y in this particular line is 2, a positive 2. So the change in y is 2. Over the change in x. Well, from there, I would have to move to the right, 3. So that's a change in x, and that's equal to 3. So the change in y is 2. The change in x would be a 3. So that's my slope. The slope is equal to 2/3. Okay, and let's do that same thing for graph B. If I start at this point and move to the next point, I'm going to go up. Well, let's see, I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. So my change in y is a positive 4. Over my change in x, well, my change in x would be to the right 3. That's a positive 3. So my change in my slope would be 4/3. And then the one that's the greater value, 4/3 is greater than 2/3. So this line would have the greater slope, which means it's steeper. And we could kind of tell that from the picture. But that's how we find slope. We're just changing from one point to the next and considering how does the y value change. That's our up and down. And then over how does the x value change? That's our right or left. All right, so let's try a few of those. We're going to find the slope of this line. And I'm going to start at the point 0, 0. And if I'm finding the change in y first, that means my slope is going to equal the change in y. Well, the change in y is, whoops, I moved my point. I didn't want to do that. The change in y is up 4, so that's a positive 4, over the change in x is to the right 1, and that is a positive 1, so my slope is 4. 4 up, right 1, gets me to the second point, which is r, and that's our slope, 4. Number 2. What's the slope of this line? Well, if I start on the point P, I would have to go up 3, so my slope is equal to, up 3 is a positive 3, over the change in y is a positive 1. So 3 over 1, so the slope is 3. Next one. This time let's start at the origin there, Q. My slope, remember, is the change in y. So the change in y is a down 1, that's a negative 1, over the change in x, well, that is a positive 1. So negative 1 divided by 1 is negative 1. So my slope is a negative 1. Now let's stop for a second and look back at our last line. That was a positive slope, a positive 3. And when we look at that, the line, it's moving up and to the right. So we're increasing as we go right. And notice that the slope was a positive number. And let's go back to our last one. This time our line is going down as we move to the right. So as we move to the right, our line is going down, and then notice our slope is a negative. So negative slopes are going to go down and to the right. And let's go back again. Positive slopes go up and to the right. All right, so we can kind of tell from the slope what kind of line we're going to get. We can see how it moves when it's positive or negative. Let's do another one. This time, it doesn't matter where we start. Let's start at R. My slope is the change in y. Well, the change in y is up. That's up 1, 2, 3, 4, so that's a positive 4. And my change in x is left 1. Well, that's a negative 1. And 4 divided by negative 1 is negative 4. So my slope is a negative 4. And again, we can see down and to the right is the movement of my line. It's slope negative. And if I go back 1, down and to the right is my line, and my slope is negative. Okay, next one. Well, this time let's start at P. Let's start here. And remember, slope is equal to the change in y. Let me just write it again. The change in y over the change in x. How does my y change up and down? How does my x change left or right? So my change in y, well, in order to get from P to Q or R, either one, well, let's do R. In order to change from P to R, I don't go up or down at all, do I? So my change in y is 0. And then my change in x, I would have to move to the right 3. So that's a positive 3. And what's 0 divided by 3? 0. So my slope of this line is 0. And notice that when my slope is 0, I get a horizontal line. So that is a horizontal line if my slope is 0. If my slope's positive, it's going to move up and to the right at some angle. If my slope is negative, it's going to move down and to the right. All right, and that is lesson 15. Hope that helps. See you again next time.